Would we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Led by Councilmember Elliott.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Did the
Roll.
clerk take the roll?
Okay, Elliott.
Here.
Goodlow.
Here.
Lilquist.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Monica Miller.
Here.
Wynn.
Here.
And he's coming in late.
So a reminder to speak into our microphones because we've got feedback from citizens that they cannot hear us on YouTube or Zoom or wherever they're listening. So we're gonna try and focus on that. And if we could take a moment of silence for the victims of, well, and the families and everyone suffering from the Buffalo and Uvalde incidents. Thank you, everyone. So proclamations, there are none. Oh, there's the lesbian and gay. Nancy, I didn't ask. Is there someone?
Yes, there are actually two presenter,
Okay.
Sarah and Michelle Denbest is online.
Okay,
They're going to share the reading.
okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Sarah Boshaw. Did you want my address and everything?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, so I'm at 111 North Chorus Street, Ellensburg. And I'm here with my friend, Michelle Danvesi she's on Zoom. You want to introduce yourself now, Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Dunbesty. I'm at 207 East Chasen Avenue, Ellensburg.
So I'd just like to thank City Council for having us here tonight. This is really an honor for both Michelle and I, as we are both board members for Helen House. And Michelle as a member of the LGBT community and me as a huge ally along with my business. So thank you for having us tonight to be a part of this proclamation. So this is the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Pride Month for 2022. Whereas in 1998, President William Clinton issued Executive Order 13087, expanding equal opportunity in the federal government by prohibiting discrimination based on sexual orientation. And
Whereas since 1999, June is recognized as Pride Month in this country. And
whereas on June 26, 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the U.S. Constitution provides same-sex couples the right to marry, making gay marriage legal in all 50 states. And
whereas we recognize the LGBTQ community has fought tirelessly for their rights from marriage equality to demanding equal protection under the law. While there has been progress, we acknowledge there is more work to be done so LGBTQ youth can live without fear of harassment and LGBTQ families and seniors can live with dignity and respect. And
whereas recent events in our community indicate that bullying, discrimination, intimidation against the LGBT community in Ellensburg continues as an ongoing issue. And
whereas these behaviors do not reflect the attitudes and values of the city of Ellensburg. And
whereas the city of Ellensburg recognizes and honors the LGBT community residing herein who contribute to the strength, vibrancy, and leadership of our city. And
now, therefore, the City Council and the City of Ellensburg does hereby proclaim June 2022 as Pride Month in Ellensburg and encourages all citizens to treat other persons as you would like to be treated. Signed this 6th day of June, 2022.
Thank you both.
thank you.
And Mayor, move up for the mayor's signature on the LGBTQ population.
Second.
Motion and second for mayor's signature on the LGBTQ proclamation. And just, I guess, for the record, there were 2 paragraphs added and you must have had an earlier version. So, but it's in writing, so I think it will suffice. So all in favor?
Aye.
I too will vote aye. That motion carries. There are no awards and recognitions as far as I know. Thank you. We are at approval of the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda is presented.
Second.
Motion and second for approval of the agenda as presented is all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Two will vote aye. That motion carries. The consent agenda.
Consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second for the consent agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Two will vote aye. That motion carries. So we are at item 6, petitions, protests, and communications. There's a communication from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission regarding Juneteenth. Nancy Goodlow, would you like to?
Yes, I'd like to speak to that. The DEI Commission has included a letter to the council and to city staff in this meeting agenda, thanking them for their work to make June 19th an observance as a city holiday. And we just wanted to express our appreciation for the recognition of the importance of the holiday to the African Americans, people who live in our community and who live in this country. And we appreciate the support of the DEI Commission as part of, as a fallout from this decision. I think it's very important.
Thank you. So we are moving on to citizen comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on something over that the city council has purview over that is not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no one, is there anyone online who would like to 3 minutes or less? Something on the, not on the agenda, and if so, would you raise your hand? Get in your, oh, sorry. Hard to remember. Okay, I do not see anyone. So, and my tech support agrees with me. So there are no business requiring public hearings. So we are at 9A. The second reading of ordinance 4889, approving the supplemental PR rezone from PR to IL submitted by the city of Ellensburg. Jamie? That is Jamie.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Jamie Ailing with Community Development. And what you have before you tonight is the second reading of ordinance 4889. The effect of this ordinance would be to change the zoning of a portion of the city-owned property on Dollar Way, a 60 by 577 foot strip of property from PR to light industrial. And if you remember, council approved this rezone and conducted the first reading of this ordinance at your May 16th, 2022 meeting. And staff recommends that council conduct the second reading of ordinance 4889.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Ailing? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this item? Seeing no one, is there anyone online who would like to comment on this rezone? Seeing no hands raised, discussion of this item.
Madam Mayor, I move second reading and adoption of ordinance 4889.
Motion and second for second reading and adoption of ordinance 4889. All in favor?
It's a roll
Roll
call.
call.
Roll call. Great. Sorry.
That's okay.
You're going to remind me 3 times.
That's okay. Elliot,
Yes.
Goodlow,
Yes.
Lowquist,
Yes.
David Miller.
Aye.
Monica Miller,
Yes.
Tab,
Yes.
Win.
Yes.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington relating to zoning and amending Title 15 of the Ellensburg City Code by changing the zoning classification of certain property within the City of Ellensburg from supplemental public reserve PR to industrial light IL.
Thank you. We're on page 130, second reading of ordinance 4890, amending portions of chapter 3.12 of the Ellensburg City Sign Code.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. It's Jamie Ailing again with Community Development Department. And this is the second reading of ordinance 4890. And what this will do, it'll align our sign code with the recently adopted changes to the Land Development Code. And those amendments will remove references to the commercial tourist zone, which has been eliminated, and will also add references to the new mixed use zones. This too, on May 16th of 2022, an open record public hearing was held. Council approved this and conducted the first reading of ordinance 4890. And the amendments presented in this ordinance were technical edits and no substantive changes to the sign code. Staff would recommend that you conduct a second reading of the ordinance.
Thank you. Does staff have, or does council have any questions of staff? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this item? Seeing no one, is there anyone online who would like to comment? Seeing no one. Ms. Miller, was that you?
Yes. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have very poor internet connection, which is why I thought I wouldn't be participating. But my name is Fennell Miller, 605 North Anderson Street in Ellensburg. I'm speaking for myself. I just wanted to point out that this is a perfect time to slip in a reference to the fact that signs in CC must be reviewed by the Landmarks Commission. In the 15 years or so since the Landmarks Commission regulations have been in place, I have personally seen probably at least 10 signs be erected by property owners innocently, naively, not realizing that they had, that this is a special zone and they had to go to the Landmarks Commission for review. It's not cross-referenced currently. Now would be a great time for housekeeping to stick in a reference to 15.280. The end.
Thank you. I'm looking at the city attorney. Is that not referenced in the sign code? It's only in the landmarks code?
I would defer to Jamie, but I know that the Landmarks and Design Commission has been reviewing sign installations and revisions. But I think more importantly, because this is just a compliance ordinance to bring our sign code into alliance with the zoning code that was passed a couple of meetings ago, that, we weren't making, we didn't want to make substantive changes to the sign code. We'll be looking at other changes to the sign code later this summer. But this was purely for technical revisions to comply with the zoning code.
And we could add Ms. Miller's comment for discussion as it moves through our summer sign code review.
Yeah, there'll be, as we progress with that, there'll be opportunities for public input. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move second reading adoption of ordinance 4890.
Second.
Motion and second for second reading and adoption of ordinance 4890. I guess I would also like to note that in removing the CT zone, we've lost the taller signs at the interchange, which is what I always use when I'm traveling across the country to know whether there's services or not. And so I would like to add that to the next sign code revision discussion as well, whether we can carve out maybe not in a zone, but in a radius from the interchange, kind of little taller signs visible from the freeway.
Yeah, I think it was always a component of the change sign clusters, so I think it would be important to keep something like that, or bring it back in some.
We're probably not going to miss anyone developing in the next few months, but yeah. Any further discussion? All in favor? Roll call. Oh,
Okay,
I wrote it down right there.
it's okay. Elliot,
Yes.
Goodlow,
Yes.
Lilquist,
Yes.
David Miller.
Aye.
Monica Miller. Tab,
Yes.
Win.
Yes.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington relating to Chapter 3.12 Sign Code and amending sections as listed in the ordinance of the Ellensburg City Code.
Thank you. So we are at 9C, page 140. The new ordinance adopting streeteries, parklets, and sidewalk cafes. This would be for first reading.
Thank you. I have the
Suzanne.
distinct pleasure of presenting this item tonight to council. So this item, this ordinance actually represents several months worth of work by an ad hoc committee, which I'll talk a little bit about. If you recall that temporary streeteries, so street eateries, were authorized through an emergency order by the city manager in 2020 to allow for outdoor seating when it was restricted inside, to allow our restaurants to continue to function. With the removal of the emergency order in July 2021, we did some work to extend the temporary street eateries through the end of the year and did some additional community outreach through the tune of a survey to gauge some just basic public perception about the continuing the street eateries. And that with a study session in mid-November, the council recommended that we extend those eateries through June of this year and create an ad hoc committee to work through what permanent regulations would look like. The ad hoc committee was made up of 2 council members. So we had Mayor Lilquist and Councilmember Tab, representatives from the EDA, which was Brenda DeVore and Kelly Vandenberg. We had the current streetery owners, Mark Holloway from D&M, Sarah Beauchamp from the Mule, and also Blake Collins from the Pearl. And then we had 2 other downtown businesses, Randy Wheeler from the Pet Center, and then also Ryan Woods from Woods Hardware, and a couple of staff working through the regulations. And the ordinance you see tonight is the result of their work together to work through and negotiate through what permanent regulations might look like. So I'm going to go through some of those highlights, and I'll start specifically with the streeteries. As mentioned, this ordinance actually covers streeteries, parklets, and sidewalk cafes. It really does establish permanent regulations that allow for temporary use of streeteries for bars, restaurants, and cafes to create temporary outdoor use of public right-of-way, and typically in a vehicle parking space, and they're intended for food and beverage services. The streeteries actually, the limitations allow for between a mix of streeteries and parklets. They limit the total number of parking stalls per block to 4 maximum per block, and that's including both sides. They're allowed on the recommendations and within the ordinance are to allow streeteries and parklets on one-way streets only in the downtown core between Water and Ruby Street and Fifth Avenue and First Avenue. The ordinance you have before you also sets aside some requirements for the Landmarks and Design Commission to recommend criteria for the look and feel of this future streeteries. And that would happen by taking the Landmarks and Design would actually create some standards by which future streetery applications would be reviewed, and the council would approve those, and the Landmarks and Design would actually review future applications for streeteries based on those design standards. And that we came to, the Landmarks and Design Commission did review the concept and their role in this, and were supportive of that. That was at their April 19th meeting, and those minutes are actually attached in this ordinance. And the reason that the certificate of occupancy would not be required for the streeteries, they are temporary in nature. And so the goal to create some standards for design was found that more appropriately for the Landmarks Landmarks and Design Commission to actually create those standards themselves. There would be site requirements for barriers and reflective markings, and for signs, as well as general safety standards. There are specific right-of-way maintenance expectations for stormwater. If you recall, we had a pretty significant amount of snow this winter. This is sort of an unusual amount. We do have in our current nuisance code, and that's why it's not called out specifically in this ordinance, the requirement for business owners, residents to clear their sidewalks. And in the downtown core, one of the discussion points was that there wasn't a lot of snow capacity. And so if the owners of the streeters would remove the snow in order to put it on nodes and sidewalks, our staff decided they would happily work with streetery owners to make sure that snow removal was taken care of in a positive way. So that wasn't called out specifically, other than for stormwater. There's conditions for which streeteries would be removed for planned and emergency maintenance where possible. Our staff could provide 90 days. There's some insurance and indemnity requirements. There's also some assurance that the streetery wouldn't be abandoned by creating a bond of $1,000 with the application in order to create those assurances that, again, they wouldn't be abandoned. And if the city had to do removal, they'd have a cost recovery mechanism. And the recommendation also from the ad hoc committee was to grandfather the current streeteries only from the design and initial application review, not from the other fees. The other change with the streeteries is to create the application fee, which is $50 initially and annually, and then also a $25 per parking stall per month use fee for the parking stalls that would be taken up. So the second element that was created through this is called a parklet. And a parklet, the idea actually came from the EDA, and it was a request to actually create a public gathering space. These are not intended for food service. They are to be located only at the ends of street and not in ADA spots or motorcycle spots, and really to create a resting place, a place where people could gather in a commons area. There are no signs allowed for parklets, and they would count toward the total number of spots, maximum spots of parking that could be taken with a parklet and or streetery. The third element was also the Sidewalk Cafe. Formally, and actually in 2010, the City Council adopted an ordinance that actually created a street use permit, and that was in its own section. And with the adoption of these new streetery and parklet requirements, the idea was to move this into its own section in the city code, and then embed the requirements that were adopted and not codified into the ordinance previously. So the only changes to the sidewalk cafes would be, previously they were required to remove the tables and chairs that would set out in the sidewalk. They're supposed to be removed every night. That has not been something that has been enforced over the years. And so to make it consistent with our practice, the recommendation was to remove that. And then finally to increase the fee for the sidewalk cafes from $10 per table to $25 per table annually. And let's see here. All right, I think that is, again, I know we have a number of folks in our audience that worked on this. We're part of the ad hoc committee. And I certainly could stand for questions, but I'm assuming that there would be some public comment from the folks who joined us.
Shall we do comment first and then questions? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to the streetery issue? Mr. Holloway.
My name is Mark Holloway. I'm the owner of B&M Coffee. B&M Coffee downtown, which is on the corner of Pine. Shooting. Corner of 4th and Pearl. Used to be there. Anyway. Yeah, I feel that the streeteries are a great addition to our community, and as well as the Parklet idea. It creates another space, a third space for people to gather. Social space, good for social interaction. Sorry. It allows travelers to slow down, stop, hang out in the community a little bit longer. So I just want to say that I think it's a positive addition to our community. I'd like to see them stay. So.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present, Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you. Randy Wheeler, Ellensburg Pet Center, 412 Pearl. I was on that committee and I was on it to stop it. I don't like the idea of this big thing out in the middle of the street. It doesn't look good for the historic buildings. They think they're matching it, but it's not. I haven't seen that many people using it. You know, they're expanding the building out into the street is what's going on there. And it just doesn't look like part of the downtown. I know everyone says, well, people will come and visit and stay longer. You got plenty of room inside to stay and play and visit and eat and whatever they want. But it just, we've been watching it, you know, and then during the summer or winter time, you know, with the snow they talked about, there was 8, 9 spots used up and now there's 4. And if you look now, there may be 2 people in there, maybe. It doesn't look, if they had the temporary ones, kind of like the brick, they've got that little fence around there and that's what, that looks nice. They got people out there. Dakota brings their chairs in and out. That looks very nice. People sit out there in the sun, have their coffee, eat their sandwiches. But he's going to build, they want to build these, they have built a big extension of the building out into the street, which I don't think lends for a historic downtown.
Thank you.
I don't think I got anything else. So I'm a no on that thing, in
Thank you.
case you didn't know. Thank you.
Thank you for making that clear. Is there anyone else in the audience? Ms. Beauchamp.
Sarah Boshaw, and I'm owner of the Mule Cocktail Bar at 119 East 4th Avenue, and I currently do have one of the streeteries. And just, I'm with Mark from B&M that we have gotten all positive feedback. And if just take this weekend, an example, it was not the best weather, but my point of sale system breaks down where my sales were, and my patio was full the whole entire weekend. And so my streetery, so it definitely is being used. I understand Randy's concern in the wintertime. It is colder. We've got heaters. People don't utilize it as much. But all the feedback that we're getting and seeing how our customers are using the space, it's a definite addition to our downtown area. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak? Is there anyone online who would like to speak? Please raise your hand. Ms. Miller. Drew, can you unmute Fennell Miller? I'll come back to you.
Ms. Miller, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just one second. I'm sorry. I'm struggling with an iPhone. I have a laptop that's dead. Is there anyone else who could go before me so I can get my comments?
I didn't catch that.
I'm trying to pull up my comments.
Yes, we can come back to you.
Okay.
Ms. Wheeler. Is there anyone? So Becky Pearson, would you like to speak?
Yes, hi. I'm Becky Pearson. I live at 1115 East 3rd Avenue. I teach at Central Washington University. I teach public health, but I'm not representing Central at this. I'm just spontaneously adding to the conversation. I really love this idea. And I think that Ellensburg is adept at trying new things. And I think that this is just neat, especially the idea of the parklets. Third spaces are very community health oriented. They help people enjoy places. They help people feel welcome in places. They help people consider alternative modes of getting to and from and between places. And so I'm a fan. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Miller, are you ready?
I think so. Yes.
Okay, so we have a timer going on the screen. You may not be able to see it, but I will let you know.
Okay. I just want to say that I'm absolutely think that parklets and street cafes are wonderful. I'm fine with the concept of streeteries in general, except that I'm worried, as Mr. Wheeler said, about their impact on other businesses and disabled people. But what I would really like to point out is that a streetery can be accomplished without permanent tables and chairs and a fenced off area in the streets, like Mark Holloway is tastefully and appropriately done for D&M, where it's mostly just a transparent low fence and tables and chairs. The transparency of that inviting Sidewalk Cafe does not detract from the historic setting around it. What I'm not okay with are these giant fake superstructures constructed of plywood and plastic, corrugated metal, and raw cement, with inevitable torn vinyl windows flapping in the delicate Ellensburg breezes. As I'm sure you're aware, these are absolutely not in the list of building materials. I beg to differ with the city manager who says that Landmarks was consulted about this project. My very first conversation with Stacy Henderson, who is the Ellensburg city staffer with the Landmarks Commission, informed me that they were simply informed that it was coming up. They weren't consulted. They weren't given an opportunity to chat about it, and they weren't given an opportunity to provide me input. So I think that you guys you have made a procedural, a processual error, a legal error in this way this has been brought before you. I'm sure you all have my letter. I hope you will read it. I think that I'm claiming that you are breaking your own ordinances. I will continue making comments if I'm allowed to comment again after this one closes. I think that if you look at the photos that I've included, you'll see the plastic, quote unquote, siding for the pearl and the plastic pediment. I ran this by an online historic preservation group around the country today, and everyone was pretty horrified. It just does not belong in a national historic district. It's listed on the National Register. It's listed as a district on the Landmarks Register, and that doesn't mean just buildings. When you have a district, that is the entirety of the landscape, and it doesn't matter whether this is temporary or permanent. The ordinance doesn't make a distinction in ECC 15.280. Doesn't anywhere in there say permanent or temporary. It just says that it must be reviewed, and that these items are not compatible with a historic district of the type that Ellensburg has, that is constructed primarily of brick with actual wood windows, decorative trim, pressed tin cornices, decorative cornices, pediments that are actually made of either stone or wood. Plastic is not an option in this particular historic district, and these are not appropriate. And the fact that you've grandfathered them in is in my
Ms.
opinion,
Miller?
not legal.
Your 3 minutes is up. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else online who would like to comment? Seeing no one, is there anyone else in the audience? Last time? Okay. Council, do you have questions or comments?
I have questions to staff. So maybe I didn't see it in here, but so, I mean, I'm not opposed to the concept or the application. But what happens when one business takes the 4 stalls? To me, that's a competitive disadvantage for any other business on that street. And there doesn't seem to be a mechanism to
Oh,
kind of
baby.
balance that, or to
Oh,
say,
baby.
hey, after a year, somebody else gets a shot, or after 3 years, somebody else gets a shot. And that bothers me a little bit because this is public right away that we're renting out.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead. Anyone else? Is it? Yeah, go ahead.
I have some questions. One of them relates to that, which is the review process and eligibility process annually as to whether or not, once you have it, you're assumed that you can re-up, so to speak, without any, if there were to be somebody else on the block who expressed interest, is there flexibility for them to get in on this, very low cost market share of expanding their businesses? And is there an opportunity for the businesses who are asked to initially sign off on it to reevaluate how those streeteries are impacting their adjacent businesses, or is it a given? So that's one question about process I have. Another, if there
So
are no
just
other comments on that.
clarification on the businesses signing off and. if you
Correct.
would like to-
The only time the businesses would have to sign off on a request would be if the business that was requesting the streetery or parklet was not directly in front of their business. If they needed to use adjacent, then the adjacent business would have to give written permission.
Oh, so there is no, okay, because there was initially, I thought like Blake had to come to us to get the initial permit. at Gallery One.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I know for our special event permits, there's a request, there's a requirement to get adjacent business.
Okay, so
For street
signatures,
closures.
yeah.
okay. Maybe that was part of.
So was there another?
Yeah, I do have concern about grandfathering in the existing streeteries, given that the assumption was that they were going to be temporary. I feel like grandfathering them in makes them exempt from whatever oversight Landmarks and Design decides to have, giving them that free reign, so to speak, doesn't feel equitable to the other businesses that will have to comply. And, being in the historic district, I appreciate it, but, everything is monitored from our signage to our banners to the colors that we use. So giving these organizations a free pass doesn't feel in the spirit of the intention of our downtown and the work that we put into keeping it look as beautiful as it does.
Mr. Miller?
I would agree. I too have an issue with the grandfather clause, not to take away from the work that's been done by the businesses, but considering that these facilities were constructed without benefit of any design guidance, essentially, we don't have, to my knowledge, we don't have a streetery standard in our landmarks and design code. It's been pointed out that any part of the facade or component of the building must meet National Historic Preservation standards, which clearly I don't think were applied in these cases. So I'm okay with acknowledging their existence. I would like, to the extent that I wouldn't necessarily want to see them torn down, I'd like to create a pathway for reapplication for design to consist once we do have standards established. I think it's interesting that we're noting that future applications will be provided, to Landmarks and Design to review standards. And then, but we also hear that we've yet to develop the standards. So if an application comes in before the standards are developed, I'm not sure how Landmarks and Design really will evaluate that. So I think we have some work to do. I think we could maintain what we have for any length of time, but I'm not in favor of a permanent.
So I believe new applications are currently on hold and they could be held until.
That's
then.
correct.
That could be a while. So, yeah, absolutely. The other question I had, and I know the intent and all the conversation has been around beverages and food. And under the definitions, it talks about streetery, et cetera, designed to allow for food and beverage services. And it made me wonder whether a non-food or beverage business in the downtown could apply for a streetery. Just designed to allow doesn't mean it's mandatory in my mind. So if Gallery One, for example, wanted to open a streetery to display some of their goods out for sale, or
Like that's why they put the parklets.
well, but
That would be
but
for non-food.
but if
Mhm.
somebody came in and said, I'd like to build a streetery and I'm going to put my products on racks inside the streetery, it's a streetery, not a parklet. That was my point. And I don't know if I know that wasn't really the intent. The question is, would it be
So-
allowed?
So that was discussed in the committee
Mhm.
and we went away from it and I can't remember what our logic was other than we only get four per, and the idea is not necessarily for businesses to just expand their footprint and their space, but also to create that the vibe of people being downtown and outside and lingering.
I completely get that. My comment would be then if that's the desired intent, and I don't disagree, then we should make it mandatory that they provide food or beverage. It's not that they can allow it. It's really the intent in the item under definitions. That was the only thing there. And then I think also, and I don't know, and maybe we've looked at this. I saw some staff downtown yesterday doing a parking survey, so maybe we're on top of this, but it occurs to me that the allocation of ADA spaces on any given street is a public works formula. Certain percentage of parking spaces need to be ADA out of however many are there. And what I would like to know is whether once we've deducted, and this is a relatively small number of spaces with these existing parklets, once we deduct those spaces out of the total count for those streets, is our ADA allocation of spaces good? I mean, are we in the place we want to be in terms of ADA allocation? That's either a state or federal standard. I don't know what it is, but if we assume that the number of ADA spaces that were originally provided were exactly in line with code, and then we remove 16 spaces, my question is, do we need to allocate some more ADA spaces? That's a question more than enough.
The other way, the ratio would be higher. You can't take the ADA spaces away. The
Yeah.
ratio of spaces would actually go up.
Yeah, I could see that, but I think in reality, we're losing spaces. So, yeah, I guess the
My-
math works that way, but in concept, yeah.
Partially to David's point is we're taking away parking downtown to begin with. We need to, and I know the city manager is actually working on that. It's part of the people we've seen downtown counting spaces. But I think we need to focus on that at the same time as this, because if we're gonna make this happen, there's 4 spaces that are right in front of 4th Street and right off the main for the Frontier that can potentially go in. There's 4 spaces up on Pearl that are already taken. There's 4 spaces for the Mule. There's 4 spaces for D&M. I mean, we're potentially losing a lot of spaces for parking downtown. And there's several times that I go down there to the pet center to get food for the animals in my house, and I can't find parking. I've got to park in the parking stall that's on the other side of Sears and walk over there just to get my crickets for their lizards. That's a,
Well, at least it's not an 80-pound bag of dog
right.
food.
No, I get, yeah. But there's
Yeah, I know.
people that are going to be doing that, and that's going to take business away from other patrons downtown.
Yeah, that's true.
you had a comment, right?
Well, and so this was again about trying to balance interests. And what we heard from the non-streetery owners was that there was some equity if there was a fee for the use of those right-of-way spaces that they felt was a trade-off for some, loss of parking. And so, the number that we came up with was $25 per spot per month. And that was, just again, that was through discussion. And so that was part of the discussion is this is about trade-offs.
So on the funds that we're receiving from these, if this goes through, are we able to put those into a dedicated account for parking issues? Say potentially 5 years down the road, we're able to actually put in a building for parking or something like that.
Yeah, and the fees that we will gain from this, if we do the math, will not be as significant to make that kind of substantial investment.
I had something I was going to say and I've forgotten it. So
I just
Nancy.
want to comment. I'm concerned about the grandfathering also. I think the comments about being in the historic district are important and need to be reviewed and looked at very carefully. If we have to wait for more streeteries to get those design standards in place, then I think that's something.
You need to speak louder.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm speaking into my microphone. I'll speak loud. I'm for the review of the grandfathering statement that is currently in the ordinance. I would prefer some consistency in terms of design standards and materials to be used since we are a National Historic District. I think that's important. I like the ideas of the parklets. But one of the comments by Councilmember Nguyen, when we were talking about that, in terms of not serving food, that we could use the parklets for that. So if I own a business at this part of the city, of the street, and I could put a parklet in down here and have my merchandise down here. Is that what we're saying can be done?
There's no sales of merchandise or any other food or beverage allowed in
Okay.
parklets.
It's just
They are
strictly gathering
spaces.
spots. Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure about that. So, yes, I like the concept, but I think there's still some work to do.
Mr. Chap.
So just a couple things to speak to the grandfathering. I think what my recollection of why the committee brought the grandfathering piece forward was one, that our current temporary resolution expires at the end of June. So we wanted to recognize the investment that the businesses have made and the value that the current streeteries had to those businesses. I mean, so we recognized that there were not standards at the time. But we also recognize that there was a significant investment in those, particularly the mule and the pearls. And so we were just looking for a path to move forward with the ordinance, while also recognizing that there were currently streeteries that had become an integral part of the business model that folks were working with. So that's where that came from. I would be, honestly, at this point, I would be concerned. We're coming into summer, so the folks that have invested in those current streeteries, this would be the time that they would be utilized. The highest utilization will occur over the next 4 to 5 months. So, not to kick it further down, but I mean, given what I'm hearing on council, it sounds to me like I would support a continuing resolution, which probably to the end of the year, which would then support that kickback to landmarks and design so that there could be standards developed.
Couldn't they be given an extension?
Well, we could just
Like
do the
these
resolution. Well,
specific
but why would we do that?
So
I
that
mean,
the rest of the pieces can move forward and the other applicants.
then
can
we're
have-
grandfathering in.
Well,
Because
but we
what I've
could,
heard in grandfathering, if I may, there's a couple of things that I'm concerned. It's one, what are the standards? Two, what's the competitive environment? And there were more than one issue raised about the grandfather. And they are complex to me.
I just wanted to clarify my earlier statement. I am not in favor of cutting someone off at the end of June and saying, sorry, you're going to have to take your building down because you did it before we had standards. I think it would be fair to allow the existing streeteries to continue until we have standards. And at such a time, I think what we need is a path to compliance, but we can't say that until we know what we're going to want them to comply with. So it's premature to take it off the table or put it on the table. I think we need to provide time and we need to provide a process, but clearly we, through landmarks and design, we're not there yet. So I'm
So
okay with
if I
everything going
may,
forward.
I would actually propose maybe an alternative path. The exemptions, the grandfather is actually handled in a couple of spots where it references exemptions. And it's actually on page 4 of the ordinance itself. And it's down toward the bottom of the page. There's one on section 7 at the top and one on section F. And section F is where it talks about the streeteries or parklets permitted under a temporary regulations as of June 1, 2022 is exempt from the requirements of this review. And it's referring to the standards developed by Landmarks and Design. We could actually create with some added language, some parameters by which the current streeters would have to come to compliance. Maybe by some timeline, by the beginning of next year or by some point in the future to be compliant with those standards. So it would give Landmarks and Designs an opportunity to create those standards, have council approve those, and then they could come back for sort of reapplying into the new year. So that might be a path to continue to move this forward.
I appreciate that approach. And I think that solves the grandfathering issue, does not necessarily solve Rich's equity issue.
And I'm not going to die on the sword on that issue alone. It points out to me that issue that I wish we had an answer for.
And I
Still
guess
support
to Bruce's point before, part of the conversation was the level of investment that's already occurred in the structures and
Mine's not with the existing businesses. Mine is the fact that one business on each block can do this with 4 stalls, or maybe 2 could do it with 2 stalls. And then you're done and nobody else can do it theoretically forever until they concede those spots. That's a problem to me. It's not one that I'm willing to throw out the entire process over. It's just
maybe we can give that some thought between now and
it
second
doesn't
reading.
have anything to do with the existing ones. It's equity on a block.
Yeah, I get it.
And to clarify, the original permit, temporary as it was always understood that these were temporary, right? There was no promise that their structures were going to stay there.
That's right.
They may have elected to build them in a permanent matter because it's windy around here, but still there was no city promise that.
Well, right, but I think, again, we also need to recognize that we're referencing them as permanent and they are not.
Right, so it shouldn't be
but-
that.
There's a semantic problem in calling them permanent. I mean, and a potential
There's also
code-
the fact that it says that the permits they have a maximum duration of 1 year. So you have to reapply every year, but it's kind of like reappointment to the commission. Are you expecting to be reappointed because you're leaving? I mean, really?
You're inviting them to be permanent by grandfathering them in.
Is there any further discussion? And
Just one more last thing to the equity aspect of it too. Why are we only focusing on food and beverage and not other businesses, say like the pet center being able to bring out their stuff out of the floor.
We
I-
talked
I
about
just use
an
you-
automatic dog wash in
Sidewalk
front of the.
I'm just using him as an example because he's here. Otherwise it'd be, anybody else. But yeah, I mean, if we're looking at this from an equity point of view, we should be looking at it as not just one
Well,
services.
I mean, if I can jump in on this, I think that the piece that you look at food and beverage is that you're looking at it as, from my perspective, of what are you creating in your downtown? That, I mean, that's why you're doing food and beverage, right? I mean, you're hanging out. I mean, if you were at the farmer's market on Saturday and saw what the mule was doing in terms of creating an environment where people could hang out on a patio while all the other folks were flowing by, and that was full. I mean, it was cool. Me pulling up in front of, I mean, Ryan was just putting it out. But when we were doing Woods A's, Woods said, well, hell, if you're going to sell me or lease me parking spaces for $25 a pop, I'm going to lease 2 of them and just call them Woods Ace and let my people come and go. I mean, because that, from his perspective, was allowing his business to move out. It wasn't about putting a display out at all. It was about locking down parking spaces so that he could control the flow into his business. We've chosen as a community and as a council to try to enhance the flow in his business with 15-minute parking in front of the pet center and in front of Woods. I mean, that's what we've attempted to do to accommodate that nature of that type of business. I mean,
That was my comment from before that I forgot was that, I mean, what I am understanding more and more is there are certain businesses that need those parking spots to turn over quickly, and certain businesses that want people to come and stay at their place for 3 hours. So Woods Ace wants people in and out in 6 minutes, and the mule probably wants people to hang out for a while. So we're trying to accommodate both kinds of businesses. And I just wanted to remind everyone why we went down this path in the first place. It was the food and beverage industry that was locked down with the pandemic, and those were the businesses that were most affected. And I guess the streeteries, allowing them to continue creates a hedge that might happen again. I'm sure we will have more pandemics, but whether we have more lockdowns or not, I don't know. And I guess, yeah, the whole structure thing, my preference originally, I went into this thinking we were going to have them temporary with fences. We could take them down in the winter so that we could do the snow plowing. And the way that they've been constructed, that's not as feasible. And when you think about it, people want the roof in the winter time anyway. When in the cooler weather, the roof isn't important. I think that we need to, in order to meet our expiration, we need to move forward with this. I think that we can make some changes between first and second reading in terms of the grandfathering as suggested.
That's one other question for whoever was on the committee, the panel. What was the conversation about snow removal? In particular, the streetery, the Pearl streetery has a sloped roof, and when the snow sheds off the roof, it'll end up in the street.
They have to clear around
But
their
is
structure.
it provided in the draft ordinance? I did not see that.
It is not specifically called out. It is, and I sort of stumped staff report, I apologize. That what is called out is that they have to allow for stormwater. And so to make sure that they're doing snow removal and their structure is built in such a way that allows for free-form storm removal. The issue with snow, we actually had a fair amount of conversation about that and about the experience of this winter. And as I mentioned that, there isn't a whole lot of holding places for snow in the downtown, and how we do snow removal is generally we come through in the middle of the night when people are not there. And we don't want, if somebody's clearing their sidewalks or clearing around their streetery in the morning, we don't want them to push the snow out into the street, nor do we want to push it into the sidewalk. So we will work with, especially with heavy snowfalls like this we had this winter, we will work with owners to make sure we can accommodate their needs and let them know when we're plowing and when it's okay to move things out. So they might not be able to clear right away in the mornings. And so we worked with the business owners this year to do that. So again, if they are continuing to be in the street during the winter months, we will have some challenges with snow removal. That again, they'll be responsible for some of it, but as far as timing, we're going to have to work with them on maintenance. And that was hard to write up in the ordinance.
In terms of using the space, and was there any conversation about they have to be using the space X number of months or percentage of the year, because it is a very low entry point to sit on for an extension of, I don't know, what is it, 200, 300 square feet of business to use when they want to use, or when they may or may not have staffing for it or an investment in it. What is prohibiting someone from getting the space and only using it for those high traffic seasons, and then otherwise just holding 4 parking spots per block for the rest of the year?
Well,
And just to be clear, I love them. I have eaten many meals at all of the streeteries.
the pricing structure was supposed to sort of incentivize, but it's not enough. I agree. I think that we may be able to think of language that says it has to remain open year round if they have them up year round. I don't know. If we want to.
And we always
go
want to
there.
think about how we enforce that as well, if that is going to be a requirement. So we did have some conversation about that, about wanting them to be used, but we did not capture that. We did not come to a decision-making place on that with the ad hoc.
I forgot, Mr. Holloway, you had an additional comment.
Mark Holloway, owner of D&M Coffee, corner of 4th and Pearl. And currently we have a fenced in area. I don't know what it is. Is it a streetery? Is it a parklet? The way that my area is used is as a gathering place. It's for our customers, but it's also for anybody who wants to sit there. It gets used by travelers stopping. It gives them a reason to stop and hang out for a second and walk their dog and go around to all the other little boutique businesses that are around us. I think we're contributing to the other businesses in the area because we are a food place with food that you can travel with. So that's one reason why I think streeteries are important, or being tied directly to restaurants is a positive thing. As far as the grandfathered in, I guess currently that would be helpful to grandfather the current businesses in as they're set, but having a path to be in line with the historic district is a great idea. So, but you can't, I mean, all the businesses that have put effort into this they've done that on their own dime. They didn't know if it would work and they didn't have any guidance. It's just like, okay, yeah, you can do it. Okay. And you can do this much space. Okay. And it's like, well, what about this? Well, there's no rules. So just figure it out. And we're kind of being guinea pigs, So I think there should be a path for those businesses that invested in it to move forward and make it continue to be a positive addition to the downtown core.
Thank you. So are we,
That matters.
I
There's
guess I
one
opened
hand
that
up
door.
online as well.
what's that?
There's a hand up online as well.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was from before. Ms. Miller, did you have additional comments? Fennell. I was just trying to ask. I don't know, Drew, is she unmuted? No, okay.
I'm here.
Did you have additional comments?
Yes, I just based on where this is headed, I would like to remind everybody that the city, when you're talking about spending money on the structures that were constructed, they served their purpose. They did exactly what they were designed to do, which was a temporary emergency, unforeseen thing that could not possibly have had regulations. I get that, absolutely fine. But now that we are no longer in an emergency situation, I would like to remind the council that you and all of the other property owners downtown and everyone has spent probably $1 million over the years maintaining the historic district to look the way it looks. And as Councilwoman Miller, Monica pointed out, every other building in the downtown has to come into compliance with the design code. And if you don't, if you grandfather in these big inappropriate structures now with no timeline in the future for them to come into compliance, that's a great disservice to the city of Ellensburg. I don't know that you're in jeopardy of losing your CLG status or having to take down that big brown sign on the freeway. I just think it's totally inappropriate for you to allow that to continue and then have building owners have to negotiate over every drop of paint and every sign that comes in. And not just the business owners, the property owners, but as you have all pointed out, future streetery applicants. I think it's very important to acknowledge that your code does not, this is not consistent with your comp plan, ECC 15.280, or any of the other places in your planning or regulatory documents that talk about the downtown being important to preserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Wheeler, and then we're going to close this in, or Ms. Wheeler.
Jerry Wheeler, Ellensburg Pet Center, 412 North Pearl Street. If I heard correctly and I read correctly, I just want to address a couple of points. I believe it was said that the surrounding businesses were sought, were spoken with before these were ever put in during the pandemic.
I guess
Pardon
my
me?
recollection is wrong about that.
Okay, because that did not happen.
I thought it did.
As far as the structures are concerned, well, let me do the snow first. My understanding of the snow removal problem at Pearl, I can't speak to if the mule had one or not. Partly because of the design of the building, the angles, the snow plows could not get in there. So we effectively lost anywhere between 4 and actually we were up to nine parking spaces at one particular point in time. And of course, no one was using it. The problem with the roofs, and we are a one-way street, and if you head down Pearl Street from 3rd, not just from 4th, you can see in your line of sight when everything else past the streetery at the Pearl, every business to the right on the same side of the street disappears. Can't see any of them. It also takes up, it's only one day a year, but it also takes up valuable rodeo sidewalk space. You cannot sit behind it anymore. You have to come out into the street to watch the parade go past it. So those are just some of the physical things, that we have a problem with as far as it existing. And of course, waiting until the end of the year to to start this discussion again, there's not going to be anybody in it for quite a few months again. So if it has to be tabled and rediscussed and reevaluated, why do we need to wait that long? Why can't that start to happen in, say, the end of October, the beginning of November? Because right now, they just exist, whether they exist to code or to anybody's preference or not, they exist. And as far as the investiture that they've made, we don't own our building. And if you'd like, I can bring you, checks and to tell you all what we have invested in our building to make it look good with historic design in mind, with no expectation of bringing in extra customers for it, just to make it look good. So that's it.
Thank you. Okay, council, I guess we have two options to do first reading with some instructions to make some amendments, or ask staff to bring back an extension instead, and have table the discussion until Landmarks and Design has some standards written. That's the way I'm.
Madam Mayor, I would move first reading of resolution 4891, and then I will provide some direction after if we get it.
Ordinance.
Ordinance, yes.
4891.
Yes.
Is there a second? Okay.
I tried.
Motion fails for lack of second. Is there another direction?
So I would move that we direct staff to come back with an extension on the resolution. My concern is I think Heidi's path, well, anyway, I know what the resolution, would be. I don't know.
22.
So I would make a motion that we ask staff to bring back a resolution that allows continued operation of the streeteries per the initial resolution.
Until
We have standards perhaps.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. How about till November 1st?
Is there a
6
second?
months. I'll second that.
So
Speak to that if you want.
the motion is to ask staff to bring back a resolution continuing the temporary use of the streeteries until November 1st. Is that right? 2022. Yeah.
So I have a question.
So let the maker of the motion.
Well, and the only reason I want to speak to it is just, it seemed to me as we were going through this, that typically when we get an ordinance in front of us, we can do like the original path that Heidi said. We can take one section and simply say this, let's do this, and that solves that. My concern is as we were listening both to the public comment and the observations and input from council, is that there was a complexity of language here that I'm concerned that we would do first reading and then come back to second reading and still not have resolution and be butting up against the deadline for the current resolution. So that's my only thought. I mean, if I thought we could get to the complexity of this at our next meeting, I would have supported the original motion. My concern is there's more than just changing one sentence.
Okay. Well, does the second,
I feel like there's quite a bit more that we need to go into on this one rather than just changing one section of it.
So what happens then on November 1st?
Well, theoretically,
Second reading of
So-
the
so-
revised ordinance.
so if I were going to line out, what I would suggest is that this gets kicked over to landmarks and design relatively quickly. That at least there's a framework then for a conversation that includes the current, the EDA, the downtown and landmarks and design, and then establishing the standards. It would allow us then to have a conversation. I mean, to the point that was made, November, going into the winter, the impact on the individual businesses I would think will be less. So you could then have a conversation about what our standards looks like. Are we grandfathering in? All of the different pieces to me that came up here in this conversation. That's what I would. So that when you begin to draft this thing, you're at least referencing something that would address some of those issues that have come before us.
So we could get the landmarks and design piece done. Can we also have conversation, staff, landmarks design, EDA, whoever is involved, maybe the subcommittee or the ad hoc committee that's in place on how to move forward with the 3 streeteries that are there now in terms of the grandfathering piece, or do we start from scratch? And
Well, Nancy, I think that's what you discuss when it comes back in October.
so we start in November to
got-
have that conversation.
No, we start in October because we would be bumping up against the same thing. So,
Okay.
so again, from my perspective, what you're doing is we're asking landmarks and design to put that through the filter of the National Historic District. Then we've had a fairly broad discussion that I think provided direction in terms of the options that we may want to look at as far as grandfathering. And then I think there's probably sufficient breadth of that conversation to have that be part of the first reading.
I would agree. I would expect a revised ordinance to be before us at October 1st. At the latest.
I was gonna just say that.
Written.
Oh, sorry.
What impact does this have on the pending application?
Are there any pending
There
applications?
are no, the last resolution, we said there will be no new applications, no new permits granted.
Believe there's interest?
At this time, staff are not aware of any interest.
I was just gonna say that I think we're talking about 2 different challenges. One is how do we deal with the 4 streeteries that are currently in place, grandfather or not, 3, 1 through 4, or 3, okay. And then the question is, we couldn't even consider approving any new streeteries without standards, right? So both of those require standards. In my mind, we need the standards to be developed. And that, to me, provides the opportunity to create a path to compliance for design. And that path to compliance would then be applied to existing streeteries, and then all new streetery applications would be subject to that. I do think it's reasonable, though, to provide some amount of time for an existing structure to be adapted to the standards. I don't think it has to be, if the standards are approved in November, I don't think it's necessary that by next spring, every existing streetery meets the new design standards, whatever those are. I don't know what length of time is reasonable, but I think that we need to be somewhat realistic about that. The other thing too, and I think it's important when landmarks and design weighs in on this, it's a challenge because they're dealing with they're always dealing with an interpretation of very rigid standards by National Park Service on historic districts and even on proposals that come through on a variety of buildings and renovations. There's always some disagreement on just how stringently the standards are followed. So I think this is going to be challenging because I don't really know that the National Park Service standards on historic preservation address streeteries as a specific built item. So we may be expecting great guidance that may not exist. And I only say that because I think it can be figured out and it can be adapted. And I think when, in addition to weighing in, I think we need to get the State Historic Preservation Review in the loop as well. So they've got some work to do. I agree. And it's not just them, it's staff. It'll be onto our staff liaison. So.
Sorry, I know it's gone on, but I would also like to understand the accountability for using the space and also the pricing structure. It feels like a very low entry point for me without a lot of investment. So I'm not sure why the $25, what market research was done for that, what other communities do, but it feels very low.
We can bring that back.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if that's a concern of council, that was part of what the ad hoc looked at. It was also partly in consultation with the businesses that currently have street areas and what the threshold was. But I mean, we don't need to do, I would suggest, again, we move on the resolution. When this comes back, come back now, there's direction to staff that says, how did you arrive at that amount?
Okay, so before we close this, I'm gonna just say, on the Sidewalk Cafes, it's $25 for each table, and there's an equity issue there in my mind, or a parity issue between, like, Dakota has these little cafe tables, 2 chairs, versus Bricks has these big stuffed couches and like it's 2 tables and with a lot of space. And so if it's fenced for alcohol service, can we think about whether a square foot pricing structure would be more appropriate than per table?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It does go towards one-way streets for the street areas.
First, no, because the Sidewalk Cafes, this is for Sidewalk Cafes, and Third Avenue is like a way wider sidewalk than some of the others. So there's extra space there, and they've taken advantage of that and put in a fairly substantial cafe, which is great and serves the same purpose of getting people out in the street. But it's,
And to your point, also just looking through this table size limitations, item 4 in that section, there's no reference to table size. There's only a reference to height. Right?
yeah.
Well, no, I'm sorry, it says length. I thought that was height. So length, however you measure that, there should not be anything longer than 30 inches, right?
Yeah, it doesn't say anything about couches either, does it?
Sorry, I thought I was looking at height, but same difference.
So, okay, so we have a motion to ask staff to bring back a resolution to allow for continued operation under the current the current resolution. And anyway, yeah, you all know what it is. So all in favor?
No.
Aye.
No.
I too will vote aye. That motion carries with 1 no. Okay,
Couldn't you wait till she said opposed?
She doesn't usually ask.
I don't, because I hear 7 yays and then I don't think I need to. We are finally at item 9D, page 155, resolution amending job title and wage for the development coordinator position.
Good evening, Mayor Lowquist and members of council. For the record, Lisa Young, Human Resources Director. I have before you tonight a resolution amending job title and wage for the development coordinator position in the Public Works and Utilities Department. The Public Works and Utilities Department has identified a professional growth and succession opportunity for their Public Works and Utilities Division. HR has worked with the Public Works and Utilities Management and the union to reach a tentative agreement, which will be ratified by a memorandum of understanding once the resolution has been approved by council. Historically, the City Council has supported professional growth and development of city staff. By way of analysis, the Development Coordinator and the Engineering Tech 1 office positions are currently supervised by the City Engineering Services Manager and/or the Assistant City Engineer, and complex plan designs are handled by the engineering services manager. It is the desire of Public Works and Utilities Management to shift complex design plan review and supervision of the Engineering Tech 1 office position to the Development Coordinator, necessitating a title change to Public Works Development Supervisor and implementation of a new wage. The new 2022 wage will be $7,020 monthly. The pay increase will occur in 2 steps. The initial change will increase the pay from $6,382 to $6,669 per month. The monthly impact of this change is $287 per month, with a 6-month impact of $1,722, which can be absorbed by the department's current budget. Upon successful completion of a 6-month trial period, the pay will increase to the full amount of $7,020. This results in a total monthly wage increase of $638 from the original rate of pay. The total base wage impact for 2022 is approximately $2,200. The staff recommends approval of the resolution as presented, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Madam Mayor, I move resolution 2022-22.
Second.
Motion and second for resolution 2022-22, amending the job title and wage for the development coordinator position, Public Works. Is there any discussion?
Question. My understanding, bringing this forward, is that we have a unique opportunity with a person who's very skilled and able to do this. We create a permanent position like that. Does Public Works feel like they can continue to find a person with those skills and same expertise if this person should leave the job for any reason, and they want to bring somebody else into that? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
It does. And there's never a guarantee, but typically when we create positions, we hope that if they open in the future, we can fill them with a like or more talented person too.
And I would add that this creates a succession path. So while we aren't creating a replacement position in the moment, if the department grows or there's a need for a future increase in staff, we would have that middle ground position. So we would have a progression for somebody to come in entry level and work their way up.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment? There's only one left in the audience. Is there anyone online who would like to comment on this issue? Seeing no one. Council, all in favor?
Aye.
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 I too will vote aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Did you hear that?
I got it just for you.
Only because I said something.
Yeah. We are at the manager's report.
Good evening again. Council, Heidi Baird Sturdaway, your city manager. Just a note, as the Congress voted in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we are starting to get information out. It's been a little bit of a slow rollout. And just wanted to make a note to council. There are a number of infrastructure grants that will be coming out. They have a 5-year spending plan. And oftentimes when people hear about infrastructure money, they say, you know, you need to chase it right away. And we have, we're in position for a number of kind of thoughtful opportunities with these dollars, and I'll keep you all informed as we work for those. The 5-year planning or the 5-year spending window actually really provides us with a great opportunity where we're in design with some projects that will be set up very well for construction in the future. So know that we're learning about those, we're watching those and trying to maximize our use for our community. So just keep that in your mind. Also, reminder that the council funded grant programs, so our community grants, work partnerships, water quality grants, historic preservation grants. And this year, the Arts Commission actually came in line with the same timeline. All of those applications are on our website. Share that wide and far, and encourage folks to sign up and apply for those grants. And those are all for the 2023 spending year. And one action I would request is to set a public hearing for the 6-year transportation plan update for the June 21st council meeting.
So moved.
Motion and second to set a public hearing for the 6-year transportation plan update. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The two will vote aye, opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you. I have a couple other items just to remind you of events that are happening. Unity Park Design Open House is on June 8th. That's this Wednesday at the park. Drop in. It's open to the public. They'll have 2 conceptual designs that are intended to elicit feedback and responses. And so encourage council. We shared the invitation to all of our boards and commissions, and again, continue to invite folks. And that's from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. at Unity Park. And one more item here is that Wednesday, June 22nd is the Touch a Truck event and also the bike rodeo at Rotary Park. So it does start at 11 a.m. It is not the last day of school. We thought we'd try something new this year. And so we're hoping that we'll have some great attendance. And we have a number of promotionals out in the community. And finally, just a reminder to council as well that Thursday, June 16th is your joint city-county study session, and that will be here in the council chambers. We will also have remote options available for folks who need to Zoom in. And so that does start at 5:30. And that's all I have for my report.
Thank you. Thanks for the reminder.
If we go to the Unity Park thing, should we wear a name tag?
Places to wear it.
Or the touch a truck or whatever.
You are welcome to.
I will.
Councilmember Elliott.
Met with the Kittitas County Friends of Animals this afternoon with city manager and city attorney and police chief, and believe we have a pathway forward to hopefully resolving our staffing issues with the shelter and providing some additional services. The conversation with the potential contracting agency is delayed into next week, but it's still moving forward. So, and everybody seems to be sort of pointed in the same direction. So that's all good. You'll start to see some coffee. I don't know what they call them, those little heat things. I don't drink coffee. And posters around the county and advertisement on the county's website. We're trying to get people to sign up for a service called Everbridge, which sort of works like reverse 911. It allows you to be personally notified via your device that, hey, something's, yes, that something's going on. It's just a QR code. And we're putting signage in some of the higher risk areas. None of those exist in the city, but this is important. Our subscription rate for Everbridge is significantly lower than 10% of the county's population. And that doesn't even factor in the double or tripling of population on busy weekends, the fact that people have no clue about what's going on and how to get in or out. So it just encourage people. It's a subscription, and there's going to be some date fences eventually set up so you can turn it on and turn it off. So you're not, somewhere and suddenly you're being alerted to something you don't care about. And then finally, so all my meetings happen later this week, but I did get appointed to what's called the state WUI code. It's the Wild and Urban Interface Code, which the city has actually adopted. And it doesn't have a lot of applicability in the city, but it does around the county and the areas peripheral to the city. There are some select areas in the city that probably qualify. But our attempt is going to be to take a code that has some significant flaws and get it to a point where the state will begin to reinforce it, because the state, 8 years after we adopted it as a city and 7 years after the county adopted it, they did adopt the code, and then they immediately froze it and said it's unenforceable. So it doesn't really affect Kittitas County or Ellensburg directly, but we're going to try and fix the code.
So our code is still in effect?
Yes. Yeah.
Even though it's a very small.
A very, very, very small percentage of the
Slice.
area in the city probably qualifies as having at risk. There's some areas on hillsides, like by the cemetery, Brook Lane area and things like that. But other than that, most of the city is affected directly by the roof. The county is very
Well,
directly.
I
affected.
remember it being just by the freeway and the west interchange.
Yes, there's some small areas there. Yeah. Anyway, that's all I got.
Councilmember Goodloe.
Yes, I had all my regular meetings, the UAC, the Homeless Affordable Housing Committee of the county, starting to look at other issues now that we've been able to help get the affordable housing project for the Knights Inn.
Councilmember Goodloe, could you speak into the mic?
Oh, I guess I don't talk about it. So the Affordable Housing Commission of the county is getting to look at other issues and some possible funding opportunities going forward for them. I had an opportunity to meet with Brad Case of Parks and Rec, and we went over process for the city working in the subdivisions to bargain for park space and green spaces in those subdivisions. And I appreciate the process that's in place, and I feel really good about the conversations that are going on right now with some of the subdivisions that have been submitted. Beyond that, that's all I have.
I have no report. I have requested and received an excused absence for our meeting on the 21st. Will I also need to request an excused absence for the study session on the 16th? It's the one day that I have offered that was not available for me, so I won't be there. I don't know, because it's not a regular meeting, do I need an excused absence?
It doesn't count against you under the code, but it doesn't hurt. either.
Motion to provide an excused absence for Councilman Miller on 6/16.
Second.
Motion and second to excuse David Miller's absence on for the June 16th meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Two will vote aye, opposed. Motion carries.
That's all.
That reminds me, Madam Mayor, I need an excused absence for the June 21st meeting also.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to excuse Councilmember Goodloe from the June 20th meeting, 21st meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
I two will vote aye, opposed. Motion carries.
Almost. It's already passed. You missed your shot.
Okay. So that's two gone for the 21st. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Monica Miller?
I missed a couple of the regularly scheduled meetings, but we are still moving forward with the cultural arts plan and working towards the implementation, and we've talked with Heidi about scheduling a study session in August to give you the full report. Part of that process, we imagine, is also considering the application to become a state certified creative district. And the administrator of that program through the State Arts Commission will be coming through Ellensburg next Monday and offering an information session at 1 o'clock at Howell Homes on the 13th. So you're welcome to come to that and participate in any level of the other stuff going on. To learn more about it, because I think it could be a great opportunity for us.
Could we get an email with those details?
They can send out the information.
Do you want to do that, or do you want me to do that?
My recommendation, if a number of folks are interested in attending the same meeting, is that we could do a public notice. So if we can send a separate invitation, and if you accept, we can do a notice if we have enough people that sign up.
Okay. Yeah. Councilmember Chap.
I did an affordable housing meeting. I can't remember if I brought this back to council, but we had a letter of interest on the Catherine Park for cottage housing. The commission will move that back to council also with the examination that the commission did on a cottage community and townhouses on that property, that I don't know exactly when that's coming back, but it will be fairly soon. Had a subsequent meeting, a follow-up meeting on the expanded Cabulance service for countywide with Councilmember Elliott and staff. That will also, I think, I think we worked through the issues that were there. It probably needs to go back to PTAC just for a final review and then come back to council for review of the expanded MOU or contract. I had a question for Nancy G. You know, I was thinking about the LGBTQ Pride Month and then the months that we've done before. And one of the conversations we had when we did the initial establishment of the DEI was the idea of coordinating with Parks and Rec on community celebrations. And I feel like that I have not seen that occur. And I'm wondering if those conversations are happening or if there's some way at a council level we can encourage that so that we're kind of cross-pollinating. I mean, we make a proclamation and then say to everybody, let's go celebrate, but then we don't provide a framework. And we had talked about that as kind of being the low hanging fruit.
I would say, yes, those conversations are occurring and we are in the process of organizing our planning for those kinds of things. We don't have anything in the works for Pride Month this year.
It wasn't, no, it's not specific to that. The general question is, we do these proclamations every month. We've talked about that as a way of the city supporting the diversity that exists in our community through community celebration. That's what I'm putting on the table. And we're not.
Well,
Is this?
I will say, I mean, a couple of the commissioners, Tylene and Teresa, organized the Pride Picnic on City Hall. That's happening every Monday. This is just an invitation.
No, it's fine, thank you. But we're not consistent in what we could do, I think, to encourage our community to participate in celebrations that would celebrate the diversity of this community. I mean,
I think this is a sign that it most likely, I mean, it's happening on some level, maybe not the scale you want it to. And I want to acknowledge that happened.
no, thank you.
I didn't know.
Right, and I didn't know that. And so
Well,
it's
now
not-
you do.
Well, but
And
my
it's every
point-
Monday
but
through the
I'm-
rest of the month.
But I guess that's really my point. My point is what feels like occurring is occurring haphazardly rather than under the umbrella of either the DEI or Parks and Rec or joint efforts. We have a PEIO, we have structure, we have parks, we have space, we have resources. We're not utilizing it. And so somebody takes it on their own initiative and sets something up that no one else knows about. Other than that, it's great.
We normally don't invite public participation in council member reports, so.
I don't, I really, this is about the, please.
I mean, when was waiting to speak, I was addressing her.
Well,
Are you,
I think she was. just
anything more to
waiting.
report?
no,
Councilmember Wynn.
So I had 2 meetings since our last meeting. Well, really just one because the other one got canceled. The Environmental Commission didn't have anything on the agenda, so they canceled this last one. And working with Heidi, we're actually going to look at other things that we can do with the Environmental Commission so that they don't run into this stagnation that they're seeing now of not having something more to do. For the lodging tax, Matt was actually really quick in getting back to me on the those little leaflets that you see at hotels for a 6-month run, focusing mainly on the eastern side of Washington with 20,000 leaflets. We're looking at about $10,000 in cost. So his recommendation is to not do that at this point, just because the events that we would ultimately be putting into these pamphlets are already pretty well known and already pretty well established events. So at this time, we're thinking of not going with that route. Other than that, he did give a sheet of traffic for the website. There was a small dip, let's see, between May 25th and May 29th. There was some attacks on the website, as all internet access has nowadays. And so they saw a drop in people using it because they were down for maintenance. But other than that, they are actually currently above last year's usage rates. That's all I got.
Thank you. I participated in the parking survey on Saturday. So we are gathering some data that in that discussion will come back to the council. So, which actually is perhaps another reason to postpone the streetery discussion. And so we have more clarity on where we're moving with the parking. I attended a webinar through Jurassic Parliament on managing public comment. I'm trying harder to invite that for every item. Chief Sinclair shared the good news that Kittitas Valley Fire and Rescue received a notice of no further action from the Department of Ecology regarding their brownfields project. So if you remember, their new station is on the old Mackner scales, which needed cleaning up, and now it has a clean bill of health, which is good news. Is that how it was cleaned with bacteria? Microbes? That sounds easy. I bet it wasn't. At the airport, Director Grannon's last meeting will be Wednesday evening, and the commissioners have decided to not appoint an interim. So there's two staff that will cover, and Commissioner Walksmith will sign the vouchers and do things that are needed. The Airport Advisory Committee is trying to keep projects moving, and they have assigned the Public Works to keep those construction projects and grants moving. But you know, we were on the cusp of adopting some guiding documents and a new website that I'd like to keep moving, and hopefully we can while they search for a new airport director. A while back, a professor at CWU with a project management class contacted me, Dr. Laura Williamson, and I suggested, well, they were looking for a project to practice doing project management. And so they kind of explored electric vehicle charging stations, and they had 3 different teams, and they all came up with different proposals. And just for your information, it was suggested the second right by the skate park. There's 11 spaces there. Fourth Avenue by Safeway. On the street, and then the other one was suggested leasing some parking down on South Canyon Road, which I don't think we need to lease, but if we wanted some down there, Triangle Park would be a better location, I think. But I guess it got me thinking about where and what criteria will we use if we were going to cite electric vehicle charging stations. One of the questions I asked them is, what role the city has. I mean, does the city government really need to do this, or, I mean, should this be a private enterprise kind of thing? And we do have some private entities with charging stations down at the South Interchange. But a lot of electric utilities are getting into providing the charging stations. And I think having some for events would be a good call. But then I started thinking, well, do we really want to bring that much traffic all the way up into town? Depends. So just food for thought.
How many spots does CWU currently have that's
I don't know.
electric charging stations?
I
It seems
don't
like if they're proposing to work with the city on putting them in the city, and they actually have more parking stalls than the city, shouldn't
Well, this
they
was
be
just a
providing some?
class. It wasn't CWU. It was just a class of students practicing their what they've learned. They weren't, suggesting anything for the city other than I think the students all felt that it should be part of the city's efforts to meet the greenhouse gas emission goals, that it was a role for government to be involved.
Would they do an inventory of existing charging station positions?
None of them, I didn't see that in any of the presentations, but it's easy enough to
Well, I know the new-
find out.
The new Tesla facility
Mhm.
that's in behind the news. I don't know what the number is, but it looked like 8 or 10 positions maybe. It's fairly large.
There are several. I mean, if you Google it, there's several. And everyone who has an electric vehicle has an app.
That's a
for
Tesla
that.
specific.
Some of them are specific to certain levels of charging and that. So, there's a lot of decisions to be made. I guess my sense is that would be part of our sustainable energy plan that we just released at RFQ for. So we'll be having a discussion. I just want to, so
I just have one more question if you're done.
I am done.
So this is for the city manager and city attorney. South Interchange, particularly one property abandoned gas station with fences falling over. Do we have any enforcement authority, or do we need to create enforcement authority for properties that I won't say what they look like? It's horrible. It's a gateway to the city, and I get it. It's fast food row, but still, that property with stuff blown over and fences blown apart. Now that windows are all broken out, it's just, it bothers.
We can certainly send our code enforcement out and confirm where our line of authority lies. So yes, thanks.
Anything else? With no